One of the most powerful action steps under Phase 2 rigor is academic monitoring, formerly called aggressive monitoring. Let's overview it together. So as I was thinking about aggressive monitoring, I thought about what other careers is it critically important that they're monitoring the situation, not just so they know what's happening, but so they can act. And so I went to the FAA website, the Federal Aviation Administration, and they call it situational awareness. And their manual says that situational awareness is the continuous process of monitoring the operational environment, maintaining an accurate understanding of current conditions, and recognizing changes that may require action. Effective monitoring enables timely decisions that support the safe and efficient flow of air traffic. I also thought of ER nurses that are monitoring critically ill patients. So I went to the American Association of Critical Care Nurses website and found a sentence on that website about patient monitoring. The website said that patient monitoring is the continuous observation of a patient's condition to maintain awareness of their current status, recognizing changes as they occur, to intervene before those changes become serious complications. Effective monitoring allows caregivers to make timely decisions that support patient safety and recovery. And when I thought about those two careers, being an emergency room critical care nurse or being an air traffic controller, and honestly I brainstormed 5 or 6 other careers where active monitoring, very aggressive, intentional monitoring is so important. I made all sorts of connections to our definition. Our definition in the land of education is that we are checking students' independent work as they complete it to check understanding and to give immediate feedback. And the reason why is because when you're able to catch a student misunderstanding during the lesson and give some real-time feedback right then to correct it, this reduces some of the need for reteach, some of the need for Tier 2. It's more than that old-fashioned, like I'm watching you or eyes in the back of my head, because this is not just monitoring for compliance. This is truly monitoring the student work, so that we can give real-time, immediate feedback. If we're going to talk about it, that means it's got to be research-based, right? So I went to John Hattie's visible learning work. Remember that a hinge point of 0.4, that means 1 year's worth of growth. So that's expected growth. And anything with a effect size larger than 0.4 speeds up learning, it heats up learning. So that's why you see this thermometer image in front of you. So feedback from tests has a, take it or leave it, it's got about a year's worth of learning effect size of 0.41. Notice that it's not just like answering a Google form and getting a grade. It's not just a grade of 70 or a grade of 54 that has that effect size. For it to have a year's worth of growth, it says learning increases when tests are used formatively and students are giving some feedback based on the performance on that test. They're not simply grades, but rather with some feedback on them. It heats up a little bit when students give teachers feedback. That's an interesting twist on this. That has an effect size of a 0.47, and I bet we underutilize that, asking them for their feedback on lessons and instruction. Feedback with technology heats up a little bit more to 0.55, but let me be real careful. This is not, like I just said, that Google form where it just auto grades. This is adaptive. So this is when they do a diagnostic, like part of IXL, for example, or Amira, for example, and then the feedback adjusts based on the child's diagnostic data. It's adaptive. The top two, the timing of feedback and reinforcement of cues, when you get up to effect sizes of 0.89 or whole numbers, then that means you're getting 2 or 3 years worth of accelerated growth in 1 year. So look at that feedback timing. It says when students wait for feedback, the value of the feedback decreases. More immediate feedback is powerful because feedback has a shelf life and will expire. Think about it. Back in high school, when your teacher gave you feedback on an essay and maybe they wrote some things in the margin, what were the chances you were going to remember that feedback the next time you wrote an essay? For me personally, it was pretty slim. I just gave it my next best shot. The final one at the top, that says when teachers offer reinforcement for students' efforts and then cues them to the next steps in learning, they'll perform better. The cues are just in time and focused on the current needs of the kids. In other words, academic monitoring. A final connection that I made as I was thinking about this, I recently took a trip to Austin to go visit my kids. And normally I don't drive. Normally my husband does the driving, and I don't really pay much attention to the Austin traffic. But on this particular instance, my husband was driving the U-Haul and I was driving our car. And let me tell you, I was aggressively monitoring the traffic situations. My lanes were suddenly disappearing. People were darting back and forth in lanes and driving fast. And man, my head was on a swivel because I needed to make real-time adjustments and actions to keep myself safe. But there are other times when I'm driving to work in the morning and I get all the way to the parking lot and I think, I do not know how I got here. I must have been on autopilot. And that's true. Our brain, when we are in routines, defaults into autopilot. And there's no place that probably feels more like home than the classroom. Teachers have developed routines and habits of what systems and structures look like in their classroom, and habits are really, really hard to break. So people might be all gung for aggressive monitoring, and they may be wanting to learn it, and they can learn it in a PD or in a PLC. But then they go back in their classroom and they already have habits there. And it's really tough to break the routines and the times when our brain goes into autopilot. That's why when I did a session this summer, our essential question, our EQ, was about how can we develop the habit of academic monitoring to make real-time instructional decisions. This has a lot to do with what our brain just defaults to when we are in our classroom. Food for thought for you guys, the TEA, Content Agnostic Classroom Observation Tool that we're all going to be learning about and using to some degree this school year. The section at the bottom is about monitoring and responding to student learning. It doesn't directly say academic monitoring or aggressive monitoring. It talks instead about checking for understanding and about actively monitoring by circulating the room and by analyzing their verbal and written responses. And then it talks about making those teachers' decisions based on what you see and how you respond. Academic monitoring isn't the only way you can do this. Sometimes teachers respond in ways that are so subtle that visitors don't even see them. I worry sometimes that campuses make aggressive monitoring or academic monitoring like a campus-wide initiative, like everybody, this is what we're going to do. And the truth is, guys, this is in phase 2 of rigor. There are so many other action steps that precede it. There are so many things both on the management trajectory and the rigor trajectory in phase 1 and even management phase 2 that need to come before. Some teachers are just simply not ready for this. So I like to think of it instead as just checking for understanding, or short-term assessment might be a term you could use. It's on a continuum. There are some things you can do to check for understanding that give you very limited evidence, like thumbs up, thumbs down, or what emoji describes how you're feeling today. Those are great practices. Those are good practices. They don't give you a lot of evidence, but maybe for a teacher who's just trying to set up routines and procedures, maybe you're going to start with cold calling sticks and they're just going to get some evidence to check from understanding based on questions and student responses. Maybe they're going to look at exit ticket data. That might move up to level 2 where you have some evidence of how kids are feeling if you just spot check a few exit tickets. Aggressive monitoring in its true form, man, that's a level 3 with strong evidence of learning. In the resource folder that is also linked for you guys in Google Classroom and on the Hub, you're going to see an activity that maybe you would want to do in PLCs if you're rolling out a campus-wide initiative on checking for understanding. Maybe some of your teachers are ready to build the habit of aggressive monitoring, and maybe other teachers need to build other less stressful, less impactful habits that help them check for understanding. You need to meet the teachers that you're coaching where they are. So you'll see that activity in that resource folder. Basically, to do academic monitoring correctly, there are 2 big parts. You have to plan for it, and then you have to go and execute it well. There's a text that describes these parts, an introduction in the resources folder. I think it's called Reflection Guide. This slide deck is also in the resource folder, and I encourage you to pause this video, or after the video is over, go and look at some of these examples. There is a video link there from our Get Better Faster book. This is a teacher, this is an elementary example. Her name is Christina. I believe this is 3rd grade math, and she is aggressively monitoring. It would be great if you're rolling this out with teachers, or if you're doing this in a PLC, or just for your own work as you one-on-one coach. That would be a great video to show with a teacher you're coaching, to say, okay, notice Christina's actions. What is she saying? What is she doing? Maybe discuss what she needed to prepare in advance, what she needed to plan for this to be successful. What's the tone of the room during this independent practice? And then if you wanted to, you could score her on the content agnostic rubric just down there at the bottom, the part about monitoring and responding to student work. I wanted to give you a non-example also. So this teacher's really good. I'm not knocking this teacher. This one's going to feel familiar to our elementary teachers because she's doing a bluebonnet math lesson, and she's doing a lot of things well. But if the teacher paused the lesson right now, what could she confidently say about class-wide understanding? Does she know who's getting it and who's not? She's monitoring, yes. She's up and walking about. But what's missing in this example that was present in the first? And then, because you always want to end on an exemplar, and I also wanted to give you a secondary example, here's a secondary example. Doesn't feel like Texas. It's not got bluebonnet written all over it, but my goodness, this is a dandy example of academic monitoring. This teacher named Julia, the kids are reading and responding and writing to a text, and if you stopped this lesson and said, who is getting it and who's not, she'd be able to tell you. So you are welcome anytime to go to the slide deck, click on those videos are linked for you to watch. Also in the resource folder, you're going to see planning tools. You're going to see teacher exemplars of lesson plans that have been annotated. You're going to see a slide deck where a teacher has mapped out the learning path that they're going to use. You're even going to see a bluebonnet tracker sheet. There's just so many different resources for you to explore in the folder. If you are doing this as an initiative, maybe with a grade level or a PLC, I just left this activity in here. We're not going to actually do it, but you could then provoke some discussion. These are provocative questions after maybe reading the text and watching the videos, where you could show them, and then the teachers could let you know if they agree or disagree and why. They're just to provoke some discussion. Just to stamp some of the key elements, because I know that right now you haven't had a chance to go read any of those resources or look through the folder. The key points about the plan, when you plan for academic monitoring, you need to think about your classroom setup. Is the classroom designed to allow quick teacher access to all students? And does your seating chart identify your fast finishers and then your slow to start? And your monitoring pathway is identified. When you go back and read the text, you'll see that Get Better Faster actually recommends that you go to your fastest students first, because they'll have something written down by then. And if you go to your slower students first, they've got that learned helplessness where they raise their hand and go, teacher, teacher, come help me. I don't know what to do. But they need a minute or two to get started. And so you go to your fastest finishers first. That you use 3 or 4 laps and that you name them. You know them from your plan. What are you going to ask for? And you name them out loud to the class. And those laps are specific and manageable, and they focus on the most important parts of the practice. I always recommend start with something really simple for the first lap. Let that be procedural. I'm coming by just to check that you've put your name on the top of the paper and that you've underlined the important information. Something simple, something procedural could be lap number 1, that everybody can be successful. And then you move in to more rigorous laps. If you plan on using a code that you're going to mark on their paper, like you saw in some of those videos where they're just putting stars or dots, you need to communicate those codes to the kiddos ahead of time. This is a chart that was on a wall in a classroom. She posted it so that if I come by and put a check mark on your paper, that means you got some evidence, the right answer, great job. If I put a question mark, it means go check that. Or if you did something wrong, incorrect. You can see another example. That one's also linked to a Canva that's editable that you could change in any way to make a poster for your classroom using your campus colors. To stamp the keys about implementing, you monitor the fastest writers first, then students who need more support. Name the laps prior to each round of monitoring, and then don't veer from your stated lap. Track your data on a clipboard or digitally to identify trends, and use some sort of coding system on student work, whether that's a check mark or a stamp, to affirm correct answers and to cue students to revise answers. You don't, in those videos, you don't want to get stuck at one student too long. You've got to, brevity of words is kind of a good rule of thumb. Also linked in this slide deck for you, how do we get good at anything? How do we develop a habit in anything? We have to practice. So you've got 2 videos there. We've watched the first one already where the teacher is practicing aggressive monitoring when the students are not in the room. But the second video, that's a great example. I encourage you to watch that one. That's a teacher and coach working together to practice looking for the feedback. What kind of feedback would you quickly give? And you don't have to be walking around the room for that. So I encourage you. Both of those are linked in the slide deck. And that gets us to the end. Remember that teachers need grace. It's hard to change a habit. Maybe new teachers need to work on something else to help them check for understanding, or maybe something from phase 1. But for teachers who really want a game changer who can get you 2 or 3 years of acceleration in 1 year, academic monitoring, just like air traffic controllers, just like critical care nurses, and just like Robin Fulbright when she's driving in Austin, Texas, those things can be a game changer. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say they could really be a difference maker. So I hope this helped. Thanks a lot.